So we should still use this too. Okay. I want to say hello to everybody. Good evening. This is a board training, and we're going to start the board training with a Pledge of Allegiance. Let's all stand. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just want to share for those of you joining us online, those of you who are here as well, just a couple of different things about this training. This is not a meeting. There are no votes taking place. There are other board members who are not here present. They're going to watch later. It is hard to get everybody in the same place on the same day, and the other board members are equally committed to this training. They're just not able to be here for this particular day, and we want to start as close to July 1st as possible so that we can begin this new season together as a board with the best training possible. This is our strategic plan. Everybody here is working on this strategic plan together, which includes the board. And so what we're going to do is learn how the board behaves in efficient ways, healthy ways, so that all the administrators, all the staff, all the teachers can do their jobs to the best of their ability. I heard this phrase that we're all going to stay in our own lane, but we're all going to be driving together and know what that looks like. Today we have two people from MSBA who are going to help us know what that looks like. One is Susan Goldhammer from MSBA. She's the Chief Law and Policy, and she's over there. Hello again to Susan.
Hello.
And also Lisa Nieder, Director of Board Development. We want to say our deepest gratitude for you joining us. And from here to the rest of the time, you guys are in charge of just leading us and helping us see how we can be a better board.
Okay.
So thank you so much.
Great. Well, we're glad to be here. We've always enjoyed coming out this direction, and traffic was great today. You know, all the construction going on and all the different pockets, but today was smooth sailing, so that was a good thing. All right, well, we're just, like Steven said, we're going to lead you through some activities. There's going to be a little bit of time for you to talk to a shoulder partner at some points, or just consider a scenario and kind of think about how you would handle that scenario, or what's good, what's bad, that other board members did in those scenarios and so forth. So we hope that you feel free to stop us at any time and ask questions. We want this to be interactive. We want it to be a learning opportunity. So if at any point you have a question, just feel free to speak up, raise your hand, whatever, and we can go a different route. And if we go down an alley that you're like, oh, we want to keep talking about this, we can certainly do that. We are not married to our slides. We're happy to give you what you need. And if we end up talking a lot longer about a particular thing and that's useful, that's great. We'll just save some of the other stuff for next time, since we already have a date scheduled to come in August as well. So let's go ahead and get started. I always like to start with just a easy icebreaker little question activity. So let's just go around the room, and what is your favorite summertime activity? So Stephen, we'll start with you.
St. Louis Cardinals.
Oh, baseball games?
Going to a game.
All right, awesome.
I'm going to say travel, because we typically make travel plans during the summer.
Yeah, awesome.
I like to watch my flowers grow.
Yeah, you're a big gardener. Yeah, awesome.
Not so good.
Mostly the watching.
Yeah. Watch my husband put
Yeah, there you
flowers.
go.
I like lake time, like being
Yeah.
outside in the summer.
Yeah, which lake do you guys go
Lake
to?
of the Ozarks.
Okay. nice.
Logo.
4th of July.
Yeah?
It was a great time.
So your favorite days just around the corner?
Hanging by a pool, just relaxing.
Yeah, awesome.
I'd say same, and backyard barbecues.
Yeah, great.
Just enjoy having everyone home and spending time with kids and my wife.
Yep, are your kids grown?
Yes.
Yeah, so, yeah, that is one of the best things when they're all home together, isn't it? What about you all? We won't leave you out.
Spending time with my family at the pool, just having fun, memories.
Yeah,
Traveling.
yeah.
Cruising.
Yeah? What kind of cruising?
The recent kind, Caribbean.
The Caribbean, nice. I didn't know if you meant like an old-time car or whatever. So, okay, that's great. Well, Susan, you want to add?
I like walking my dog and seeing the fireflies and listening to the tree frogs. It's something about that sound that just reminds me of summer.
Yeah, yeah. Mine is also travel. I was snipping on your conversation. I'm also going to Germany at the end of July, beginning of August, so I'm so excited to check it out. So yeah, travel's always great. All right, thanks for sharing those. So let's go ahead and get started. We're talking all about healthy relationships tonight, healthy relationships with all different categories of people. So we're going to talk about the administration, the community / parents, and the teachers union, because we know that's that was mentioned to us, that was a group that you guys interact with a lot. So I put some Post-its between you all, so if you would grab some and use the blue for administration, the pink for community and parents, and the yellow for the teachers union. What does it mean to have a healthy relationship with those groups? So just use separate Post-its for separate ideas, and I'll come around and you can kind of move them to the front of your table when you've got one written, and I'll collect them and sort them up here. I'm gonna give you about 5-ish minutes to take some time and just think about that. What
Do all three of those?
Yes, do all three. What does that mean to you, a healthy relationship with those groups?
I know it's not a competition, but they do better than me.
It's not a competition, but you're winning.
Exactly. I have to tell myself it's okay.
That's what I do at work all the time, so I'm
Post-it person.
very comfortable with the posted activities.
So you're an expert.
Bring me all the workshops.
Workshops all over the place. I would do that professionally. Okay, yeah, just don't.
Yeah, I'm gonna be sorting
You're
it out.
grouping, okay, so I'm just gonna hand these to you. Stephen is very prolific.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No,
I can
you're
keep
fine.
going, like, if we're time boxing this, I'll
Okay.
stop, but.
Yeah, we can wrap it up here. We got a good, we're seeing some common themes. All right, so definitely seeing some common themes here with the administration. Lots on communication, right? We want that nice, even, easy flow of communication from the administrative staff to the board, and the board feeling like they can give their input and really speak their truths and their thoughts, and that those will be listened to and so forth. In fact, listening is also a very common theme we're seeing here, to listen to all these groups, lots of listen, which I think in education is so important, or any kind of leadership role, which you're both in, two different types of leadership roles, but you're all leaders, so listening to the concerns and ideas from all these groups. We had respect listed in a lot, so respecting opposite each other, more listening, creating solutions, collaborating together. I love that with the teachers union, a lot of collaborating, creating solutions together, showing that you're going to work together. That's great. Speaking truthfully, avoid micromanaging with the administration, trust their experience, clear expectations. I think that's great. That kind of goes along with that shared vision for direction and priorities. With community and parents, is treating them with respect. Again, open communication. We had lots of people say that. Feedback loops. See the good in their concerns. I like that. Again, that kind of is over here with the listening. Safety, trust that we care and show it. So those are all a great start. I feel like you guys all have, you can tell that you have your hearts and minds in the right place here when you look at all these things that you've listed. So we're going to go through and we're going to kind of take this, which is kind of big idea, and hopefully give you some more actionable items related to these things as we go through and talk about these three groups here. All right, so thank you for doing that. All right, so we're going to talk first about the administration, so that healthy relationship with administration. So creating and abiding by communication protocols. We are actually, this is something we could spend almost 45 minutes to an hour on, talking about how the board is going to communicate with the administration and with the community and so forth. And we thought that would really be best saved for the retreat when you have your whole board together, because that's really something that the whole board and the administration needs to agree on. So that, and you guys listed here, communication is huge, so just know that will be coming in about a month or so. Fulfill your responsibilities, but stay in your lane, right? Stephen mentioned this earlier. Board functions up here at the strategic level. You even mentioned your strategic plan. That's your #1 focus, to monitor that. And so staying in your lane and not trying to do the administration's job for them. You pay these people all a nice salary to manage the operations of the district, so we want to let them do that. And just keep in mind, like I always tell board members, think about your own job. Would you want somebody calling every day that's not doing your job, telling you what to do, right, in your ear all the time? You would not want that, so you want to stay in your lane, and we'll talk more about that. Keeping questions at the governance level is one of the main ways that you stay in your lane. Not every question is a governance level question, so again, keeping them more at the strategic level, and we're going to look at some examples here in just a moment. And then, of course, delegating those operations. So letting the people who are paid to do the job, and you are acting in more of that monitoring role. All right, so let's look at these governance level questions. So what are they and why do they matter? So it really allows you as board members to do your monitoring, but still stay in your lane. Okay, so you let the administration know, like, we're watching you, we've got this plan, we're holding you to it, okay, but you're not stepping on their toes, all right? So I was at this conference I was at last week. There was this man named Phil Gore who travels all over the world doing board training, all over the United States, I should say. And he mentioned this in one of his presentations, that asking governance level questions makes you a good board member. And asking good governance level questions makes you a great board member. He really felt and preached that the types of questions that board members ask really determine what kind of board member they are, and if that makes them more effective in monitoring the district. So let's take a look at some examples and non-examples of these governance level questions. So let's say on your agenda you had the calendar, the school calendar adoption was up for a vote, okay? So a non-example would be if you raised your hand and said, can we just get rid of all these PD days and just do a late start every Monday for PD, meaning teacher PD, okay? Some schools do that, some schools have all day, some have late starts every so often. So that would be a non-governance level question. But a governance level question would be, how does the district decide how much PD time is needed, and then how it's allocated or scheduled? So looking at those two questions, just with a shoulder partner, and you guys can be a group of 3 if you want, or if you want to work on the 2 corners together, you can. Kind of just talk to each other. How are those 2 questions different? And why is one considered a good governance level question and one not? Just take 30 seconds.
Well, want to go into a lot more detail? What do you think?
I think the first one can be put in person as defensive response. Like you can feel like, how do I get rid of, that just feels versus a curious question is what I would describe the second one as. And I think those are completely fine. If you're just really wanting to know what the formula was to come up with that, or if there's a statute, or if there's a underlying piece, that's how I would see it. So, yeah, I really like that format.
We're not necessarily doing the task with creating but it's the same kind of thing, like you just said. I think that's like the big differences.
Okay, wrap up those conversations. All right, who would like to share what their partnership talked about?
We can start, I guess,
Yeah.
if you want. You want to say your
Say
favorite?
one thing you guys.
I heard somebody just said to me once that the board's job is to approve the plan, not make the plan. And that seemed like an easy way to understand.
Distinguish.
That helped me. Compared to the other ways I find myself pulled towards like thinking creatively, I'm gonna make the plan.
Yeah.
And so that helps me. And I feel like the second one is more of a approve the plan, not make the plan.
Okay, great. Anybody else say it a little differently?
We just felt that the first one could be a little off-putting because it says get rid of, which is you could feel different to the person that would try to respond. Whereas the second one is a really comfortable, curious question that they may just be asking the how-to, the formula of, or the underpinnings in case there's statutes or whatever that dictate that. So.
I like how you said that curious question. I heard you guys say something too, more of a question to seeking understanding. That's what the board should be doing, seeking understanding of the decisions that other people are making. Did you guys want to add anything else?
We just talked about it was kind of what to do and versus that how did you come about it, just the seeking to understand. We had very similar conversations to others.
Okay, great. Nice job. Let's do another one. So let's say you're getting ready to vote, the board's voting on a new math curriculum adoption, okay? So a non-example would be, does this curriculum include timed tests for grades 1 through 3? Kids need to learn their math facts. Versus a good example would be, how does this curriculum include a focus on fluency and skills as well as problem solving, a goal that was written when the program evaluation began? So again, how are these different? Do you see the difference?
It seems like just kind of more focusing on identifying the problem that you're trying to solve rather than asking specific questions about, like you said, the how versus the what kind of.
Yeah.
It's another good way to kind of slice and dice that.
Non-examples kind of laced with an opinion in it as well. You know, and number two, the example is really about seeking to understand.
Right, and I really like the second one too, included that they've seen a goal, like maybe there was some documentation provided in an earlier packet, board packet that talked about we're gonna review the math curriculum this year, and maybe the curriculum coordinator presented their goals that they had set before they started looking at various resources and curriculum and so forth, or writing the new curriculum if they're writing it themselves, right? So I love that the board is actually having the employee refer back to goals that they had probably shared with them earlier. So again, that holding administration accountable, but not stepping on their toes and doing their job for them. All right. Oops, wrong way. All right, so let's see now if you can just identify yes or no. So let's say the agenda item is the assistant superintendent is giving a report on student discipline data. I don't know if you guys do that, but a lot of districts every so often give reports on how many referrals and things like that, discipline report. So the question would be, can we have all of our staff undergo sensitivity training to decrease the amount of discipline referrals? Talk with your shoulder partner. Do you think that's governance level or not?
I'd say so. Specific with a reputation instead of just like, how is the district going to ensure
Oh, are they falling off?
you know, we're fair about or equitable with our discipline referrals or something.
I think it's a statement behind these questions.
Yeah.
Professional development.
Like, when my wife asked, what too? A lot of credit to me for
Like, so you're just like, what are you doing?
It's not even a question.
Okay. Let's start with you guys this time. What do you think?
We were just saying it was probably more of a non-example of one in there, just that goes a little bit towards specifically what are you going to do rather than maybe how are we reducing discipline, how are we providing different training for staff members.
Exactly, yeah, kind of getting too specific, trying to imply that something specific should be done, trying to solve the problem. Great, what about this one? Can you have the assistant superintendent provide not only the number of referrals, but the number of unique students receiving the discipline referrals? Is that governance level or not?
No, it's a good leadership question, but it's not a board question, really.
Question.
Yeah.
But just to wonder like what they're trying to get to.
To me, it feels a little bit better, but I don't know that it's at the, I don't believe that it's at the governance levels. It's digging into some very specific
Still feels
things
like you're
instead of
trying to
asking
solution
some generalized
ultimately.
questions, is my thought.
Okay. But the rest of you agree, or do you think it is?
It feels like it's a third category, it's just, I feel like you're just looking for information
Yeah.
that you might need to use to make a governance level decision.
Okay, so for that reason, exactly, Stephen, I would say this is a yes.
Okay.
Because if maybe they want, the district is proposing maybe doing some, like adopting a character behavior program in the middle school to address the, the discipline issues, well, you might want to know, is it really a problem, or is it this, if we have 130 referrals for a semester, is that 10 kids doing those, or is that 100 students doing those? Because those are two different problems, right? As a board member, would you want to vote to spend money on a program, a curricular program that maybe takes time away from, actual coursework? If we have to plan in this character education, then maybe we're taking minutes away from the core classes. You might want to know, how many unique students are we really talking about? So for that reason, I would say this is more of a governance level
That's like
question.
context, basically.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you
So
might be
that
thinking
makes
of a,
sense, yeah.
when I write these questions, I have something in my mind, and obviously you can't read my mind, so that probably is
Yeah,
where
no, I
you
like
ask
that.
about your things. All right, so what about that top one? Can you use that same context and change that to a governance level question with your partner?
Yeah.
See if you can write that into a good governance level question that has the same theme or idea.
Like our staff is the district.
That's good.
Housing pressure.
Just
I would say it's about, I think it's even bigger than that though, because to me, that's just like their, us is that sensitivity training is the solution already that they want. So I would just wonder if like the thing is like, yeah, if the real problem we're trying to solve is making sure that we're equitable in our discipline referrals and
future plans.
over disciplining one group versus the other, and maybe it's just like, how are we ensuring that we're being fair in this or something?
Yeah, that's a good idea. So take that idea and just go upstream from it. but not
Yeah.
try to just-
That's my thought, because otherwise I'm afraid that it's just like,
Yeah.
we're already saying, well, how are you dealing with sensitivity training without asking, like, is that the solution we need, the problem we're trying to solve for is the other one.
Okay, I'm gonna let my board members answer this one. I know you guys work together. Jane, do you have one too? Did you?
We'd just done it before you'd said that.
Yeah.
Oh, you had, okay, so I'll let you guys go first because you seem to be done early.
Do we have a plan to decrease the amount of discipline referrals?
Do we have a plan? Yeah, can be as basic as that. What did you guys write?
We just took a little different twist on that, just like how is the district ensuring that we're being fair in our discipline referrals or that there is equity in our discipline referrals?
Okay, so kind of taking that bend on it, just seeing if the referrals are equitable and so forth. Yeah.
I guess on that too, with either of these, it's kind of like, well, this is my product management hat putting on, but like, what's the problem we're trying to solve here?
Right. Mhm.
And if it's a concern about the number of referrals, or are they fair referrals? Do we have any
Yeah, you don't know. We could
all
take
of that
another
kind of
support.
stuff.
Do teachers need support? What support are we giving teachers who have a high number, who write a high number of referrals?
What's the goal that we're
So there's
trying to do
different-
this in service of?
Yeah, based on what the full report was, I mean, you'd be
Yeah.
getting a lot more information from that administrator. You could formulate a governance level question to kind of
Yeah.
fit that situation. Yeah, great, awesome. All right, so we always want to let you know that these can happen before or during the meeting, okay? When you get that board packet from the administration, what day, you guys meet on
Thursdays.
Thursdays, and what day does the packet come?
Fridays?
The Friday before. That's pretty good. You have almost a full week. That's a good amount of time. Do you guys feel like that's enough? I'd say
But
that's
we get a
longer.
couple of days to
Yeah.
submit questions.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, so those, we just like to remind board members to ensure that even those questions that go before the meeting, that you're sending to the superintendent or board president, whatever your protocol is that you are making those governance level as well to the extent that you can. Sometimes it might be something a little bit more picky, but you would still want to try to keep those at that governance level. What about that discipline data question that we asked here at the bottom? Can you have, providing not only the number of referrals, but the unique number of students receiving the discipline? Would you think that would be more of a before the meeting or a during the meeting type of question?
I would say administration would prefer before,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
because then we could maybe provide that at the meeting. so that'd be good.
For sure. I think it's great, yeah. Any type of question where data needs to be collected, it's really, really nice to send those to the administration before, so they can collect that and either get it to you before the meeting, or
During the
you can say, the administration might say, ask that again during the meeting, I'll have the answer for you by then. Okay, however the administration tells you to get, or lets you know that they're gonna get you that answer. So yeah, just thinking about, is it best to ask it before or during? Sometimes we recommend both, ask before, and maybe you get your answer, but we know that you have a district, a community that really likes transparency. They probably really want to know you're doing your job, I'm guessing. And so sometimes it might be beneficial to ask a question during the meeting that you asked before and got the answer to, but it's a really good question. It's one you think the community would like to know that you did ask ahead of time before you voted on something. So some people think that seems weird, and I've heard some board members tell me, well, that's like showboating or not being authentic. But you're getting your answer, but you're also showing the community that you're doing your job. So I don't see it in that regard. Okay, so another one. Let's say you've got a student transportation contract, the purchase of an activities bus. Let's say you're going to try to start running activities buses to get kids home after events, after their practices and so forth. So a question such as, what is the predicted life of an electric school bus versus a diesel school bus? Governance level or not?
I'd say yes.
I think yes, you could have
It's a
that
big
one.
decision how to purchase.
Yeah, I think that's a great question to ask. Yep, that's a good one. Good governance level. What about a student transportation contract for some field trips to the Edward Jones corporate office downtown? So question, why are we busing all of our fourth graders to the Edward Jones building downtown? Can't the Edward Jones people come here?
It's a good one. I don't think it's governance.
It would be great.
What's the purpose?
Yeah.
But once you get to that second part, then it's like, okay, well, that's a little different.
Yeah. Yeah, this is kind of getting into the weeds a little bit. You're kind of like asking them, questioning their decision-making skills. Most districts, especially ones of this size that are larger, have a whole field trip process in place at the buildings, right, that they follow. Usually they have to be tied to the curriculum in some way. So what might be a better way to ask this question? Can you make that more governance level? You can take different avenues, so put that in governance level.
What's the connection? What's the learning outcome?
Well,
How do we get to come to that decision?
what's this cost?
Oh, for sure. I already started with that question.
Yeah.
But like, if if you assume that the protocol's been
Field trip
followed,
budget,
assume
is this
that we're just
within the
Right.
piece of
And then that way you're
then
like, well,
I think
if people who,
the level of
because
question, if
they
you try
also
to
know
talk
by
to strategic plan,
going to Rich Jones,
what
Rick
learning
Tracy
outcomes
also have.
for fourth grade?
Presumably,
That's how I would
though,
just say,
bus,
for how is this tied?
presenting it,
Yeah.
they've already
What
determined that
getting out of
it's.
it?
And it very well could be.
So
Very well, I
we
mean,
should-
Yeah,
there
like
could
what
be.
is does this fit
Or
in the
that
district?
could not be.
Yes.
Because you're paying degrees on district.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe we could also then just ask something about how are we
Return on investment.
Yeah. Where the kids learn.
Yep.
come to the decision to bus.
Okay, what did you guys write?
We just said how does the trip to Edward Jones better support student learning?
Okay, I think that's great. Yeah. Anybody have take it a little different angle?
Yeah, we talked about how might it connect to the curriculum, what might they learn.
It's the same.
Yeah.
We
It's a
just,
question for the CAO.
yeah,
Yeah.
we just kind of looked at it from like the financial perspective too, of just
Different
like,
angle.
how did we come to the decision to bus all fourth graders downtown?
Yeah.
Just to help us understand.
And
Yeah.
is this already in the budget? And if it was, then it's more of a decision maybe for the next year budget discussion.
Yeah, those are all great. I think probably something like this generally would be a consent agenda item if you're approving a student transportation contract. So those might be better questions asked again before the meeting. You're kind of getting in the weeds if you're asking too much about this field trip during a board meeting. I don't think that would be a good use of board meeting time per se. But if this is something you're really curious about, it would be before. But again, I would stay away from things like this because there should be processes and policies in place. You might ask, do we have a policy regarding field trips and things like that? Or maybe you look that up yourself. But really staying out of the particulars You have educated people making these decisions. Somebody in the district thought that this has educational value, right? So you're going to trust that they're choosing activities that have educational value. Now, when you talk about the money involved, that might be something if we're getting into, I know a lot of districts are worried in the next couple of years that fiscal times might get tighter. So those might be things when you think about tightening up the budget. Are these the types of things we keep for students because they're interesting and good for kids, or are the things that we have to tighten our belt on and cut? So good job, all good questions. All right, so we talked about governance level questions there. Again, that should be a big part of how you guys govern, how you monitor, asking those governance level questions. Let's talk a little bit now about delegating operations. And we're gonna look at that through a scenario. This is a true story, by the way, of a district who is renamed in the scenario, but this actually did happen. The Colston School District is in the process of building a new all-weather track. Board President Zeke, upon talking with various people, learns that the track will be a red clay color. Through talking with the construction manager, he finds out that the surface could also be black, which he thinks will look much better. He adds an agenda item to the next meeting for the board to discuss the color of the track. At this meeting, the athletic director reports that the track coach recommends the traditional red clay color because it won't absorb the heat as much, making it easier for the runners to perform on hot days. The president calls for a motion to vote on the track color. So let's talk about this with your shoulder partner again. What do you think of Zeke's actions? What was good about his actions? Maybe what was not so good? There's some good and some bad there. So talk that over.
Where are you at?
I don't like it.
Just so people know.
It's a little too far in the weeds. Back to the frame that she gave us, which is on the governance chapter. And that could have been just a color question, so that's a problem.
And then he has
Right, and I guess I was kind of jumping to that the president then just wanted to know that, so she knew trusting that the AD has
the AD already.
the right recommendations.
Oh, so he doesn't work with the president's change his mind?
And the president like wanting to change the color from red clay to black, actually, what you're saying.
Yeah, okay, I was gonna say.
But again, if the AD also comes back and says,
Yeah,
okay,
almost
we're
on there.
that way, and then the president still calls for a motion because he likes that.
There's just so much
But why are you in the business?
bigger work for the board to do that
Especially if there's reason behind
this would be hard to,
So was good.
yes.
Nothing was good.
He had 7,000 kids at my.
All right, to wrap up those
The
conversations.
aesthetics. Lovely.
It's very complicated.
Mhm.
Try to find the good somewhere.
All right, we'll start with you guys this time. What do you think? What was good about Zeke's actions?
The only thing that I could think of is that Zeke at least, has an interest in aesthetics for an investment.
He wants,
So
he's very,
positive.
was a smaller community, so he was
Yeah.
very, he just wants it to look the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's
So
good.
he's got a good
His
intention.
intentions maybe were good.
Okay.
I feel like that's really like smart for us to claim, because a lot of times our questions have good intention behind them.
Yeah.
So just being able to identify that and realize that we're meaning well,
Mhm.
but this guy shouldn't be talking to the construction manager.
Right.
I was
For
way
one.
in the weeds. Like
But you can
everything else
imagine
was
this,
bad.
right, in a small town, driving by, you're like, oh, let's get out and look. Construction's fun to look at, right? I'm watching like the Mizzou is adding on to their stadium, and I drive by that and I'm like gawking at it, watching, it's neat to look at. So you can see how you want to go out there and look around, oh, and there's a construction manager, start up a conversation. So, yeah, it seems like he cares. What else did he do here that actually was appropriate? Yeah.
I mean, he at least added an agenda item to the meeting.
Yeah, he added an agenda item. Yeah, he's gonna let the board talk about it. He's just not trying to ramrod it through. He's bringing it to the board to decide.
I think it might have been better if he asked the question prior to the meeting taking place, like how did administration arrive at color selection? I understand that there are different opportunities, because then you could have gotten the coach's feedback first and had known prior to even going in that direction.
Yeah. So what are some of the issues or some of the ramifications of his actions? What's the fallout gonna be?
I think a logical process there would just be to think about track color is not governed by board policy. And so if you think about that that layer of thinking, you're far deeper into those details. And so I think if you can bring yourself back up a notch and think,
Yeah.
oh, these people understand the AD has a recommendation.
Yeah.
So,
I imagine it also created an awful lot of maybe unnecessary work for some people. I mean, it sounds like your AD is coming to a meeting to probably had to present some information
Yep.
for decisions that, you know, again, probably could have been solved by a more curious question earlier on.
I think there's also some potential unknowns here, and what I mean by that is he put it on the agenda and then he calls for a vote. If the vote goes black color, black may be $100,000 more in cost than red, and that's not a part of this conversation at all.
I will
So-
add that the construction people were actually there that night. I think they came to every board meeting to give an update on the construction. The construction manager was there, so they actually asked that question, and he stood up, and it really wasn't more about, I don't know if they asked about money, they asked about time. They were really concerned with the whole project being done by football season starting. This was in the spring, and being done by their deadline in August or whatever it was. So they had a guy there that they could ask, yeah. The AD was there to talk to as well, to give the coaches recommendations.
so what was the answer?
What, they did vote to change it to black because the construction manager said it could be done on time. If they made the decision that night, he's like, you gotta tell me now, or we can't make the change, but they did do it.
It's also not good for kids. It
Right,
sounds like.
that to me, I was like, well, didn't they just say that wasn't good for the athletes?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of appears that way, but
Okay.
he's kind of putting appearance. But then I'm sure he was like, oh, it's only really hot a couple days, or,
In that situation, what happened to the construction manager? Did he quit, or he or she quit?
Not the construction manager, but you know who did quit?
AD.
Nope,
Superintendent?
track coach, the one that they asked for the recommendation. He did resign at the end of the year.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so that was a kind of a big fallout in a time where there's a teacher shortage, lost an employee over kind of getting in the weeds here. And again, he had good intentions, he just wants it to look the best. I mean, this was a big project for this little town. It's kind of one of the towns where everybody goes to all the football games. And so he wanted it to look great, but his good intentions kind of got him in the weeds and had some kind of bad ramifications. So kind of have to think about those things. Even when you're passionate about something, sometimes we have, as board members, we have to step back a little bit and make sure we're up here at that strategic level and not in the weeds. All right, so just kind of a review, you keep that big picture, strategic view. You have to realize that your actions must benefit the whole, like the whole district or all students. So was he really thinking of students here? Probably not, thinking more appearance and facilities, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but kind of put those above students. Always want to put those students at the forefront of our decisions. You have to understand that all parts of the district interconnect. So these changes, making about track it connected with basically human resources and with personnel. So this can be a domino effect sometimes when you make decisions in the weeds. Things might happen that you weren't initially expecting to happen. So I just want to give you a moment, board members. Can you think of a situation when maybe you've got out of your lane a little bit? I know most of you are pretty new, you've only been on the board a couple of years, but you don't have to say anything out loud. I just want you to take a moment and reflect, like over your board service. Like, has there ever been a time when you asked a question where you're like, maybe that wasn't strategic, maybe that was more in the weeds?
So I can't think of a time I did it within this
Yeah.
setting, but sometimes I like brainstorming. I like thinking of great ideas, and so sometimes I'm like, here's these 5 ideas, and I love them. I think they're good for students, and I might share them with somebody, and I'm thinking it's just more of a conversation about ideas, but when it's coming from a board member, it feels almost as a demand or a requirement or directive. Yeah, and so like I know for me, I'm thinking just more of a playful, what can we do for kids? What can we do for students? But with this position on the school board, it comes across as maybe a directive that is in the weeds.
Yeah.
And so I have to pull back brainstorming because it comes natural to me, but in this way, it really is getting out of my lane.
Yeah, and that'll come up, I think, too, when we talk about communication protocols in the future, because we might want to establish some protocols, like when you have some ideas, or when you go to a MSBA conference, maybe you could listen to a presentation from another board, and you're like, oh, that's some really cool things they did. and you want to share it, like what's going to be the avenue for sharing where it doesn't seem like a directive, but just a sharing process. So we're going to talk a little bit about, you want to build that collaborative relationship with your administration, particularly the superintendent, because that's primarily who you'll be speaking to, but having that collaborative relationship where maybe at a work session, you have a moment where you can like share ideas or throw ideas out there that just, you know, to be considered kind of like a little work session or brainstorming session. So you might put that as part of a meeting sometimes. So it's not seen as a directive, but just part of our process for thinking and problem solving.
So is there an issue with, so in the case of like presentations, when they're giving presentations at the board meeting and we've got questions like, well, have you done this? Have you tried this? You know, whatever. I mean, is that fine? Or is this more like, I guess that's where it's like, well, where's the line for that?
Yeah, I don't
Because-
know, have you tried this? It's kind of getting in the weeds, but I think, how did you come to that decision? Or how did you make the decision to do it this way? I think is good, because then some of that stuff usually comes out, like the different options maybe they considered and why they chose the option they did, you know, depending what the topic is.
So, so I think I know a situation that Amy might be referring to, where she had something in her experience that really was a great question for this particular presentation. If one of us has experience from our own past that might be specifically helpful in this situation, is it okay to maybe ask that question beforehand, maybe beforehand to other folks in a different avenue? So
I
somebody
think
else
so,
does
I
it?
think,
Like if it's not coming to a vote, like I understand if it's like, you know,
Like Director Ponder, for example, is a big baseball guy. And so if he had questions about a new field that's being constructed or renovated, he may have questions about just things that we don't ask,
Right.
right? And so I thought those questions he was asking was very appropriate, helpful, allowing us to see that it was done well. My question would be, is that kind of a set of questions
I think
good
as-
for that setting?
as long as
or
they're at the
beforehand?
governance level, when you're asking more of the how,
Yeah.
not, you know, did you consider this? Or, you know,
Yeah.
what, how questions, why questions are good.
Yeah, and that's what he had done. He was asking questions
So,
and he
yeah,
considered that.
I think those are good monitoring type questions.
But I think
I
it's
think-
real important to remember you've got that invisible hat you can't take off, right? Because it's really easy to scare the poo out of your staff. When you are with good intentions or just plain flat out curiosity, asking questions. I mean, staff, when you get a question from a board member, staff tend to drop everything. So you think you're coming in as a community member, as a parent, but you've got that invisible board member hat on. And you come in and ask about some detail about the baseball stadium, and suddenly you have rerouted somebody's complete day because, oh my gosh, we've got a board member and they're concerned, and they think that you and your constituency are concerned, and that is, so it's this interesting balance between, we don't want to say you can't ask questions, but developing an understanding that when it's coming from you, you can unintentionally, most of the time, cause some drama that you didn't ever want, and also, you know, change the trajectory of your staff. And so that's the thing. So is it okay to ask a non-governance question before, or that's the problem, is it's not governance level. And so how do you, and every district struggles with this, how do you as a parent, you have a question for your teacher, how do you deal with your teacher of your child as a parent and not scare the poo out of them? And the principal and the assistant principal and the director and the you know, all of that, because you asked a question.
So let me ask, and so Jane and Amy, first of all, the example I used for Mark, I thought I used because I knew his questions were appropriate and good. So Mark, if you're watching us, we're aware. So there are some presentations that we receive and we don't see the slides until that day. And so we don't have time on certain occasions to ask questions that might be those informative questions of why this or that. And I think that might be one of the things that helps us ask questions ahead of time, is if the presentation, especially from other third parties who are coming from, usually like our staff are just on top of it over and over and over again. But third parties, if they were able to present their presentation earlier, we can look at that earlier. Is that
Yeah.
fair? I mean, I think that's,
I think a lot of this boils down to the matter of trust. You talk about scaring the staff and things like that, and how many times have you heard me say, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I have this question. Normally, when I was treasurer and dealing with Carol, we would go through the presentation and I would have questions, and she would answer them, and I'd say, okay, but that was an aha for me, so I'm going to ask that question during the presentation, and I would, and she always appreciated the fact that I told her ahead of time what I was going to ask. But at the same time, it's really hard for people with an inquisitive mind to not ask a question, and an inquisitive mind is a good thing to have. But I think it comes down to that trust. If you build trust with the administration beforehand, so that they know you're not coming after them with a gotcha, they're a lot more comfortable.
okay,
So it's just me.
I think
Jane,
that's
I
a
think
great way
you're-
to summarize it, is
Yeah.
that I have board members that misuse questions,
Yeah.
just either to show off themselves, or
True.
to try and embarrass somebody, but most of my board members just are trying to be good governance,
Right. I think
and
we
are
all
trying to ask the questions,
I
yes.
think
that-
we all want the same thing, and that's what's best for the kids.
Jane, I was just gonna say, I think it helps too when those questions are always in advance, so, because if you really want a good answer and you're representing the community, I mean, that's your role.
Right.
You want the community to there's gonna be some people that are gonna ask or have that similar question, and they can't ask it. So if that person knows in advance, this is a question, they share it with you, and you say, oh, that makes perfect sense, that, I'm gonna ask that question during the board meeting, it just provides some clarity, I think, to the community members as well, who you're representing.
Okay. I agree.
And it builds more trust up with the community, with your staff as well, because they're able to give a good presentation, not get thrown off by so many questions that they get nervous and then start bumbling,
Right.
They're not speaking in front of big groups every day on camera, so having them give a good presentation where they're able to answer your questions builds up that trust with them and, with the community, which also bolsters their confidence, which makes them more effective workers. It's just a good cycle.
I know I've struggled, I know just already just with a particular issue that we've got, with trying to hold people accountable and get enough information to make sure that I feel comfortable that they are doing the diligence that they need to be doing and all of that too. So I mean, that I think for me has been a bit of a struggle, where it's like, well, how are we supposed to build trust with the community also, if we don't look like and we don't have the information ahead of time to be able to know what they're going to say, so it's like that part's a little challenging. I think it's real clear on a lot of things. I think there's some things that I think it's a little trickier with to, when you've got specific questions that might be challenging to put into a governance model, but I'll niggle on that.
Yeah. And it might be something, maybe it's a little below governance level, so maybe before the meeting would be a better chance to ask that question to get,
And is that something then too, though, like just thinking about it, when we talk about communication strategies and stuff too, like maybe it's not, maybe the better forum for that is to go to the person on the admin, internally that is directly responsible for that too, and just not press on that person that's necessarily presenting, but also make sure that we were following up with additional questions after the meeting, if it's not a vote scenario. Anyway, I'm just thinking out loud, but.
And sure, and I think you want to work out those communication details too, because I know in some
so we're not
districts,
going
they
straight
don't
to them,
necessarily
but
want
like-
you emailing all these people individually, but maybe funneling it through the board president, or funneling
To
it
the
through the
super,
soup, and maybe
and
the
then,
soup says, Amy, will you answer this question for the board,
Right.
and kind of
And I
managing it
have
that
found
way.
that to be very, very fruitful on both sides, so that we track all those questions as they're occurring. That's a great question. I don't have that information in front of me, but then you have to follow up. Like, you have to provide an outlet for that, and whatever that's determined to be. But I think that's super important to not feel the pressure when you're at the podium to know every single answer. That's a trust that I would get you the answer if you had a question I didn't have right in front of me, so.
Yeah, and I would even say, going to the superintendent, like, hey, Amy said last week that she was going to give us this answer. Can you maybe, put that to the top of her radar, or let us know what the status on that is, because you might forget. I mean, we're all human, right? Maybe you've got
most of us.
just forgot about it or whatever. So, anyway, instead of contacting her directly, I think I should tell them soon. All right, so let's look at this scenario. So board member Tisha has been serving for 2 years and has never missed a board meeting. She gets the DESE newsletter and sees lots of information about literacy programs and professional development. Her district's math, social studies, and science MPIs fall in the target category, but the ELA MPI is at approaching. She emails the superintendent an agenda item request asking for an update on the ELA program and what kind of professional development teachers are provided in this area. And just as a reminder, like on the MAP test, target is the highest, then it's on track, then approaching, and emerging is the lowest category. So what do you think about Tisha's actions? Are these, she kind of getting in the weeds here, or is this appropriate governance work?
I feel like that's pretty appropriate.
See some head nods.
You can tie it to the strategic plan. It's a curious question.
It's not offering any specific remediation. It's just asking like,
For an update.
hey, it's like, this is where we're not where we want to be. What's going on with this and what are we doing about it? Like what's already
Yeah.
in the works.
Yeah, we think this is a great question because it's, one, tied to academics, and that should be one of your main priorities is the education of students. So yeah, we want to know what's going on with ELA, what are we doing to support teachers, what are we doing to get better? So this is a great monitoring question, so we think this is definitely good board governance work. All right. We sometimes talk about it this way, that teachers are on the ground level with the students, principals are just a little bit higher up, kind of supervising that, stepping in when needed. Then you've got your superintendent and admin team looking over all those buildings, all the principals and so forth. But then the school board, you're up there at that 1,000-foot level. Sometimes we use the analogy that you're in a helicopter and just looking over the forest, and if a forest fire pops up, then you're being strategic. Oh, we need more resources over here, so you're making the call so that the superintendent and the staff get resources to quell that fire. Over here is looking good, so you're giving a lot of praise to the people over here because this part of the area is looking great. So just kind of staying. Sometimes we say, are you in the helicopter? Are you staying in the helicopter? So just another analogy that we sometimes use, so you can kind of think about that. And sometimes it's a fun way to remind people, like if people are getting in the weeds, like during a discussion, say, hey, I think we're getting a little out of the helicopter here. Or sometimes people say we're getting in the weeds or getting out of our lane. There's all these phrases we can use, but sometimes the helicopter one is one that people kind of smile about. It's a little less attacking, I guess. Just a nice phrase you can use if you feel like people are overstepping. So why is it sometimes hard, though? What are the reasons that board members sometimes do kind of insert themselves? I'll let you talk about that just with your partner. Make a list. What are some of the reasons? Why is it sometimes hard to delegate the authority to the superintendent and
When
staff?
things are going well.
I think that's important to say.
And I do too.
It's emergency. I get to the time
Tendency to
people
want to get closer to it
Exactly.
for the right reasons. For the right reasons.
Exactly.
If you feel that
Emergency or priority.
there's a crack or something you would want to jump in and help.
Theoretically, I agree.
I think,
It should be.
well, I guess that falls under like part of like if you're really passionate about
I
something.
think of your life experiences too, because you all come to the table as an expert in some field that you have worked in or are working in. Well, and I think that's important. I think that's important for us to think through too, because then it gives us
naivete or
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
each team have that tie
awareness.
into Amy's project manager, you have an accounting background, that's gonna
there's a lot of things you can ask.
light to something. And that's okay, but then that also makes you feel
I'd even say
that maybe that that person is void of that, and you're bringing that to the table, I can see where that would be.
Yeah,
it is.
Nothing is,
Like a-
we should,
It just gives you that feeling.
and so like, to be honest,
Especially when you don't see
and then another reason would be.
And you were seeing
Something
these
saying your
snippets
soul's
of
corrupt.
time that are coming to you, and
You're a
terrible person.
As in, if you are seeking
I will do that, I will just absorb all, I will do all, you obey all.
I like that.
That's
That's a legitimate reason.
Yeah, it's not a, that would make it hard to delegate authority, is to feel like.
I'm very sorry you don't want to reward me or that person.
Exactly.
That's a terrible thing.
Yeah, but again, it might be, well, something just like this, this idea.
They're always going to want to know more. So if you won't give it to
Yeah, I think we all fight that sometimes, right?
All right, kind of wrap up those thoughts. let's just go around and each pairing give one, and we'll just go around until we've exhausted your list. All right.
Lack of trust, I think
Lack of
that's
trust, okay.
an easy one.
All right, you guys?
We talked about, like, the board member has an expert part that they're bringing to the table.
Okay. So board member expertise.
Right, their work, their life experience.
We also talked about the fact that it's easy to delegate when things are going well and when they're not.
That's like,
Okay, so things that make it hard to delegate, so we can add another thing, rough waters.
Yeah.
like, I was like, crises create everybody operating out of stress.
Yeah.
And so that ends up all of us behaving from our different part of our brain even. Yeah, Jane, thank you for sharing that.
Okay, you guys?
You have a passion for a particular area or something you've worked with before?
Yeah. Passion for an area. Good one. You guys have anything different?
Yeah, we said, like, they just don't know better. So they've never been through a training. They've never been through a governance piece, right? So they don't understand the role yet.
Lack of understanding, don't know the role. Yeah, you guys have anything else on your list?
Nothing that Stephen wants us to share out
No,
loud.
but.
Whoa.
Here we go. We're just
This is-
being funny.
It has nothing to do with anybody in this room, but
Yeah,
but somebody might just, they don't want to share because they don't care. Like they have to be the expert. They have to be the savior. They have to be the one. And so.
They just don't want to delegate.
Yeah.
They just want to do it.
Well,
My way or the highway kind of thing.
Okay, so
Sage on stage.
kind of control issues type
Yeah,
thing?
somebody has control issues. We'll
That's
say
a
that.
nicer way to say it.
That's a very nice way to say that. Yeah, those are my words.
Okay, do you guys have something different not on the list yet?
No,
No,
I
we're
think we
just
have.
Anybody else have anything that's not on the list yet?
We're just having fun now.
I mean, I think it's probably in there with passion, but just like the desire to help, they want to help.
I think that's a little different, like they're helpers. A lot of times board members, I mean, you're volunteers, right? If you're volunteering for a job that has this much commitment, you're a helper type of person, so, yeah, want to help.
And then our last one is, I think some board members sometimes in the past might have just had too much time, like they just have capacity, they have time. Not all board
A lot of time on their
members.
hands.
Extra time,
Yeah.
extra help and support.
Yeah.
It's a board as a hobby.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true, I like that, yeah.
I feel seen.
I like how you put a lot of extra time. Not just extra time.
I read that and I say, retired.
Yeah. All right, this is a great list. You have almost everything that's on mine. So that lack of trust, and there's really two kinds of trust. Can they do it? And then there's also will they do it?
Yeah.
You know, those are kind of two different types of trust there. That ego due to expertise, sometimes it's real, sometimes it's perceived, right? Delegating takes more time. That's one we didn't mention. Like sometimes board work in a big district, change is slow, right? It takes time. People want things to get done faster, so they think if they insert themselves, things will get done faster. And then that concern over losing control, you guys mentioned that. All right, yeah, those are all great things. So, you know, the way to avoid these challenges, we need to build some trust, right? We'll be doing more of that on August 2nd when we have the whole board here, trying to build that trust, getting to know the administration. You know, the more you learn about people, learn about their styles, just their personalities, the more trust automatically you have going into it. And then hopefully you've kind of got new leadership, set some expectations, and then that trust just builds. All right, so the benefits of delegating, like why we want you to do it, it really does support the authority of your leader, okay? When everybody knows who's in charge, things just tend to work better. If, you know, staff have different board members calling them, they're like, who's my boss? Who should I listen to? It creates chaos. I think somebody mentioned that earlier. So we want to avoid that so we have a smooth running machine. It creates clarity for staff, and we really feel like that builds strong staff morale, right? If you know who your boss is, you know who you take your messages from, it just makes a stronger workplace environment. Creates collaboration. We talked about that a little bit earlier. You really want to have that collaborative relationship with your superintendent and their staff so that, you know, if he's got a really tough decision to make, that he feels like he can bring it to the board and say, I've got some ideas on this, I really want to get your feedback, you know, before we, you know, make a recommendation as an administrative staff. So if the administration trusts the board and the board has you know, has been delegating the operational duties to the staff, they're going to be more likely to trust you and share those things with you. Elevates district priorities over individual preferences. A lot of times if board members are inserting themselves, they have, like we talked about, some passion for an area, and maybe that passion doesn't cover thinking about all kids or all the facets of the inner workings of the district. And then, of course, it just makes things more efficient, okay? Especially when you've got a big district like this. There's workflows in place, right? There's strategies, there's procedures for doing things, and if people are inserting themselves, just kind of like puts a wrench in the gears that are turning, right, and can slow things down and make things more inefficient. All right, so this is just a short list of things we see commonly by well-intentioned board members that they do that they really shouldn't. So just thought we'd add these things. And I don't know, this is not from anything we've heard around here, this is just things that we've collected over time. Popping by buildings for an unscheduled visit. Okay, we really encourage board members not to do this. If you want to see things, how a building is running, talk to the superintendent. They can work with the principal to schedule a time to maybe do some visits, do some walkthroughs at, you know, whatever buildings you're wanting to see, or if there's programs you want to see in action and so forth. So it's real, again, we talk about being inefficient when you don't delegate. You just show up. A principal might have a plan for the day and what they're going to get done, and then all of a sudden they've got a board member that they've got to, you know, chauffeur around to different classrooms and so forth. So try not to do that. Meet with staff without board or superintendent's blessing. Okay, sometimes again, board members can be very well intentioned. They're like, oh, they post on their social media, I'm going to be at such and such coffee shop Saturday from 9 to 11. Come by and just tell me what your concerns are, without letting the whole board or the superintendent knowing you're doing that. That's not a bad thing to do, but that should be a board decision, right? We talk about collective authority, making decisions as a board and not as individuals. So it's not bad to have these little listening sessions, but let's make it something that the whole district knows about and plans, so that every board member can participate. If you just do this on your own, it makes the community like, oh, Stephen's the only one who cares. He's the only one doing these listening sessions, when that's not necessarily true. He just kind of went out of his lane and started doing that. So we should talk about that as a board and make that decision as a board if that's something you want to do. Talking to district vendors and contractors, again, just like talking about Zeke, you know, he thought he was just being a good guy. He's talking to the contractor, getting the lowdown on the construction, but again, that can cause some issues. So even though you're well-intentioned, don't do that. Trying to solve stakeholder problems or concerns. You know, your neighbor comes to you, talking about the basketball coach, benched your kid, you know, or benched their son, you don't really, you know, they're unhappy. They talk to you, can you do something? Can you talk to somebody about the coach? That's not a board level issue, right? So even though it's your neighbor, you might really like them, you might really like the son, you might think he's an outstanding player and shouldn't be benched. That's not something board members should get their fingers dirty on. Asking the superintendent an unreasonable amount of questions. And I say this just because recently, in the last year, I've been working with the district where the superintendent called and we were going to do a workshop with their board, and he sent us the questions he was getting from a particular board member, and it was like 30 to 50 questions for every board packet that came out. He was spending over a full day just asking a lot of questions that were really in the weeds. So when you think about your questions, keep them at the governance level. And if they're true governance level questions, you should not have 50 questions about one board packet. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind, that a good superintendent is going to answer all your questions, but remember, they are managing the whole district. They don't have time to be your personal little soundboard and answer a bazillion questions. All right, so that's basically talking about the administration. We are going to go next to the community and parents.
If I could just,
Yes.
I think sometimes they've asked people on the board, are you going to be just a rubber stamp? And what I'm hearing all this we just shared was not about rubber stamping anything. It was just about staying at a high level with their questions so that you can guide and put resources here for that fire, say the helicopter, using that example, but nothing that you shared had anything to do with rubber stamping.
No.
It was all about just staying at a higher level.
Yeah.
So that's helpful to separate the two.
Yeah, and those questions that you ask might lead you to vote no on a particular agenda item. It's just getting the information, but also trusting your staff that they're doing their due diligence. And your questions really are about asking, has the administration done their due diligence before making this recommendation? And if they have, you would hope that you would trust that it's, you know, the right recommendation. Yeah. All right, so relationships with your community and parents. So kind of 4 items we're going to touch on here. Having a district's communication plan, a community engagement plan, honoring what we call chain of command, and then making decisions based on the welfare of all students. If we kind of focus on those 4 things, generally we'll build a good working relationship with your community and parents. So talking about communications, This is a plan that's strongly suggested by DESE. Do you guys have a district-wide communications plan?
We do, but interestingly, I don't know that we share it with the board. It really is, our team operates off of it,
Mhm.
usage drive messaging and stuff, but we haven't traditionally really collaborated with the board on that.
Yeah, well, I don't know about collaborating, but at least sharing what that plan is, I think would be good. It might be, worth putting on an agenda just to share what that plan is. We really recommend letting the district do the talking. That helps maintain consistency. Everybody in the community, parents are getting the same message then. Do you guys have a social media page, the district? We also really recommend that you just share the district's post. But, we've seen some board members who like to give a play-by-play of every board meeting on their own social media account. And sometimes it reflects what happened in the meeting, and sometimes it really has a lot of opinion put into it. And that can sometimes create a lot of friction within the community because they're hearing two different things. So we really think it's a good idea just sharing what the district puts out. I mean, it's a free country. You have First Amendment right to post whatever you want on your own accounts, and you can do that. But we think if you want to build that good rapport, good community relations, it's like having one clear voice from the district is a good thing to do. And then kind of monitoring. Is the district sharing the good and the bad? Transparency is a word we hear a lot from community members who are unhappy with things like, we didn't know this, the district isn't sharing this, they're hiding this. So really that's part of your board is look at what communication, what is being put out there. Are they sharing everything, the good and the bad? Sometimes there's an incident at a school and some communication will go out, like if the police were called. Usually the district will put out some kind of email to that school, or maybe it goes on the whole district page just letting know. We had an intruder outside the school. We decided for safety precautions to go on lockdown. We raised the lockdown at whatever time. All students are safe, that kind of thing. And as a board member, that happened, but that message wasn't put out to the community. I think as a board member, you should be speaking up and saying, hey, our parents, our community members need to know when things like this happen, even if it's not news you want to share. I mean, those things are important for people to know about. So that's part of your job, is to monitor that communication is going out. And then we always say, share the good, be a promoter. You guys as board members are really ambassadors of the good news. If you hear about things, or maybe you're asked to attend an awards ceremony at one of the schools, and you visit to hand out some of the awards, maybe you take a picture and you share it. I was at such and such middle school today, and got to see so many great kids, earning awards for citizenship and whatnot. So sharing that good news, kind of being that megaphone for good news is, I think, another good way to promote just that trust and good feeling within your constituents. Community engagement plan, I think Susan's going to talk more about this one.
And the reason I'm popping in here is just because this has a law attached to it. So you are required now by law to have a community engagement policy. And part of that policy has to be that any resident of your district, if they go through the chain of command, can get on the board's agenda, okay? That is something that the legislature put in a couple of years ago. But what we have found as an association and nationwide and our other associations is that the lowest level, I would call that the lowest level of community engagement, is just allowing a person to come. Now it's not, I don't mean to diminish it, okay? To allow someone to speak is important, okay? It's important to have that pressure valve. But as far as community engagement goes, that is not two-way reliable communication, okay? That's one-way communication, and typically it's one way because we don't have an agenda item. It's just something that they have brought to the district, but it's not a deep agenda item. And so this community engagement plan, we encourage districts to, and that's really where the hard work comes in, is to put together a true two-way community engagement plan. And so my question to you right now is, how does your district connect with the community? In what ways does the board and the board connect with the community? How do you do that? Why don't you turn to your shoulder partner, chat a little bit, and then we'll. How's that go down?
But I think that's
Well, we do a bunch of
They bring in
Citizens from the schools.
Yeah.
Yes, I've heard about that. And
Yeah,
That
so
would be
we
a
do
good
that.
example,
Let
yeah,
us see.
for each student, yeah.
Yep. She already has it. You know, I thought this was past the rules, and now we go through a change of command, like every issue, you can go through all the superintendent, you cannot resolve it at that point. First,
Do
he
that
has
to Dr.
30 days or 11 days. You take the problem, he can't solve it, you can go directly to the board for 5-minute discussion. One way.
What you're talking to, but you might ask her for clarification, because it was a couple years ago that we had to all update our, policy and script it out, yeah, script it out on all of the
Yeah.
pieces to it. But you may ask her that question.
So you have to go through the two, have all that,
Because I thought you could email the board secretary.
Yeah. So you can- Well,
Everything
after
that you just said,
You're
like,
stealing
but-
our ideas.
Good question.
Over here bragging on Jen and all the things she did.
Well, we've done things like,
It's kind of like we have a community.
new curriculum gets rolled out, they actually have this program open up, you can come and look at all the curriculum and standards. They do a lot, but when it comes to conversation,
I think we're gonna change,
it's all,
we decided we're changing.
I can probably.
St. John is that French?
Create conversation.
You don't know.
There's a bunch of it.
My husband thinks
Just sitting down like
I think his French, but he was on the St. John's side, he was a lot of
Conversation, I feel like it's back and forth.
Is there some radio announcer?
Oh, I don't know that.
The engine, yeah.
Oh, they're Kansas City, he's a reporter of some sort.
You get a lot of emails.
All right, let's think. Okay, so there's actually been research done on effective school boards, because there was a time, maybe 25 years ago, where there was this really big question. There was a trend kind of in the big cities, like the mayors taking over school districts, like Chicago, for example. That's an example of like not having an elected board, but having mayors appoint, those kinds of things. And people started really asking, do school boards matter at all? Like what impact do school districts have, school boards have on their school districts? And so there was some deep research that was done on do school boards matter, and if they do, what are the effects? So there was a correlation found with effective school boards, and they came up with a list of criteria. One of them is reliable two-way communication with the community. Okay, so reliable two-way communication with the community. And there are some other things which we've already covered, but delegation is a huge one too, being policy driven. There's some other things that we're probably going to get to at your retreat, but this is kind of a big one. So my question to you is, how does your district connect with the community? Anyone want to share? Yes.
We have Jen.
Jen.
Well, I wanted to go last because I want to see how much you guys have been paying attention.
It is a test. How about Mark? Why don't you give us one thing?
I would say, like, the Citizens in Our Schools initiative is certainly a community engagement, where we have at least 35 to 40 community members that come in on a monthly basis to learn all things about the way school functions.
Okay, marvelous, marvelous. And do you feel like that's reliable and two-way?
Oh, for the people that are in there, yes, absolutely. And then I also think it provides them an opportunity to learn about the district, and they go and champion or share the good or things that they think need to be improved on. They share that, out in the community.
So that is excellent. And actually, I'd heard about this program because you guys do a great job. I'm very impressed with that. It's a safe space for your community members to ask questions, right? And to get feedback, and then you get a feeling for, what's on their minds, right? Okay, what else?
I like the Senior Palace program.
Okay, what's
We
that?
have our community members that are 55 and older, and they're invited to come in and see something fun. Maybe it's the Cupcake Wars, or a band concert, or a baseball game. And then there is conversation beforehand about a topic. Maybe the superintendent's giving some updates and asking some questions and getting their feedback. So we're engaging those people that may not otherwise be connected to our school. Their children or grandchildren are out. So I think that gives some two-way conversation.
That's great. Great. Okay, so what about this team?
Oh, I go back to Jen, and she founded or started the Citizens in Our Schools program as well. So I stand on my answer.
Listen, we go to Jen, but do you have another way that the district connects with the community?
The district or the individual board members, I mean, we all have websites that, or, you know, Facebook accounts or whatever, that we post things that we take from, that the district has put out there. You know, certain athletes, certain musicians, whatever accomplishments that there have been made. We also, I mean, I get a lot of personal, or not personal, emails myself, I'm sure you do too, from patrons and people in the district that have this issue or want this answer or whatever. So I do my best to answer what I can and send the rest on.
What about the board as a whole? Are there any?
Well, help me answer.
We don't do board, I think there was a time here, pre-COVID, we did like a brownies with the board, predates me, where it was more of like a, well, it was brownies with the board, or whatever, people could come in. I don't know that they were super well attended. We've moved to more, we try to have a topic, like make it a little more intentional. So we also do citizens roundtables. We didn't do as many last year. It kind of depends on what the things are, right? But when we were considering the 1 mile walk rule for transportation, right? We usually have about 100 people show up. There's a little information sharing, but it really is, most of it's like share your ideas, thoughts, solutions. It really is community problem solving. So those have been really effective, and board members are typically attending those. Senior PAL, some of the other things you've heard, board members are invited, and usually not the full board can come, but people will drop in. So I think our community gets to interact with them, and not to say there's not merit to brownies with the board types of things, but around these really intentional problem solving things. And I think it's a good opportunity for the board to hear from the community and people to share ideas directly with them and with admin. So those have been good. And the other piece I would say, traditionally since I've been here, it's been really more admin, but going out into the community as well. So we do a lot of chamber, you know, Rotary Club talks, things like that. So it's kind of, again, it's a little bit taking, yes, what's going on at the district out, but we're hearing from stakeholders too. And that could be something, again, I don't know if that's overreach. I don't know that it's traditionally been board members involved in that, but admin certainly does that. And that's, I think, been pretty effective. And
We have coffee with the principals too. I mean, that's not a district-wide, but high school principals tend to do that.
And surveys, lots of surveys and things too.
Well, our strategic plan came through a lot of the community roundtables. And so there are a lot of those conversations took place. And then whenever there's a bunch of new curriculum that is being presented, we open up this room, and they're just on all the different tables. People can come in, ask questions of each different version. And it's hard to understand, like that example, how much of that is similar to what other school districts do, or maybe like we are especially transparent in areas like that. And
You bring up a good point, Stephen. Every meeting that we have is videoed and taped, and people can watch it live. So I don't think every district does
yeah,
that.
and that's a
great.
good thing to identify too. Yeah.
I would add, like, although it's not necessarily at the time, like comment, but in its pure form, public comments at a board meeting are meant, when done appropriately, are meant to give the board feedback about concerns that the public may have. And the board may not even be aware of that it's a concern. And so it can be a driver for the board to say, wow, thank you for sharing that. We didn't realize that that was an issue. We will talk to administration about, to better understand kind of why this is a concern. I mean, so.
And those are followed up, like you guys follow up on those too, if there's stuff that's heard, you know, that it's not necessarily us, it's going back to anybody from patron comments, but I know kids have mentioned that
It can be a good
it's
thing
addressed.
done the right way.
No, I think patron concerns, that kind of agenda item is absolutely appropriate and essential, and now required by law as well, for good reason, right? But if it's the only way that boards, and actually you guys are on the advanced level as far as community engagement, so I'm really very advanced.
Very impressed.
I would just add too, if you see one of our board meetings and the board meeting ends, typically all of our board members, they stay, like, and they engage with community. Community comes up and strikes personal conversations or things that, hey, you know, like, and And
Yeah.
that can be a good thing as well. I mean, it's about building rapport between the board and the community.
Yes, the challenge is always, community engagement, public comment at board meetings is great, except for the fact that you never know, is that an issue for just one person, 5 people, or is that is the hardest part as a school board, is trying to weigh. You are weighing the interests of thousands of people, and you only have so many resources, and you have so how, when you're steering the ship, it's easy to start doing this, based on a few people, and some people are more comfortable, particularly if you're videoing all of the meetings, some people are more comfortable coming to the mic than others, okay? And so the challenge for districts is that reliable two-way, are you getting representative voices, okay? So I have a lot of districts that all they have, when I say, what's your community engagement, they'll say, public comment. Anybody can come and talk to us, but they have no idea if that's representative,
Sure.
if that, they have no idea. Or we take a survey. Well, who do you send the survey out to? Parents, okay, but is that the only stakeholder that you have concerns with, and all of your parents taking the time to fill out the survey? And so it's hard, it's difficult, because there's no perfect way of getting that feedback. And so, and you don't want to, crowd it with volume. Like, I know that my sister in her school district, they quit answering the surveys because they got too many of them. And she's like, I don't have time to answer all of these surveys. And so that district learned very quickly that that was not reliable communication because people dropped off dramatically. So how do you have the systems in place? It sounds to me like you guys have a lot of varied systems and ways to get feedback from the community. That's great. That is something that every district is continuing to work on, struggling on. The kind of the brownies with the board, not that I'm advocating you to start that back up again, but it's a lovely just to be able to say we have this opportunity, and that way, if you have a shy person who is not going to come to public comment and speak up, that they know that's there, but obviously we don't want to waste people's time either. So finding that sweet spot in your community, yes, building the relationships, but also continuously as a board understanding, and that's difficult for my board members too to understand, just because 2 people come up and are concerned about something doesn't mean that the ship is sinking. It might feel like the ship is sinking, but what other information do we have? What other data do we have to determine whether or not this is something worthy of, navigating the ship a different direction? So, and that's difficult. That's difficult. But it sounds to me like you guys are doing a lot of things that I wish more of my boards were doing as far as getting that input and getting that input in front of. I'm a fan. Illinois School Boards Association has a document called Connecting with the Community, and that was designed for school boards to just kind of discuss. There are more ways than just public comment to connect with your community.
I've got a quick question on that
Yes.
too. Just, do you have any best practices or creative ways that you've come across for ensuring that you're engaging a solid cross section? Because I still feel like even in all of those events, and even with surveys and stuff, it's just so hard to get the people who are just underwater in their own lives or not engaged in various ways, but some of those family situations can be really underrepresented but really in need of representation. And so how do we do that? Jen, you probably have ways around that too, but I'm just that's the piece where I just, it's the same, we have a lot of the same repeat people come to patron comments, and we have the same people who email us, and it's always the same squeaky wheels. And surveys, we did that, the last big survey we did, I thought was awesome. When you're getting at least a few thousand responses, great.
That's helpful,
that's
yeah.
better, But has anybody cracked that?
you wanna speak
No,
up?
I wanna hear your answer.
I can tell you what, I taught in Columbia for 25 years, and what we did there is we held, like you mentioned, roundtables. They called it a World Cafe, which is similar to the round
Yeah.
table, but it was invite only. And they really were intentional about getting different segments of the population, inviting them and feeding them. They always said if you want people to show up, you've got to feed them dinner. And so a lot of times your PTA
And
presidents will
childcare.
have some good contacts on some good people, or your principals. You know, if you reach out to those individual principals, they'll know people like this, you know, this is an active parent who's, you know, all about the kids, and they'll have some good suggestions on maybe ways to hit different demographics or know some people. A lot of times if you reach out to different types of churches, the minister might know somebody who's got, you know, that would be a good advocate for schools or has good ideas or be good at serving in that way. So actually just make an invitation. And you might have to invite twice as many people as you really want to show up, but at least you're really being intentional about trying to get those different segments of the population.
Okay, like that.
We've done, not so much with events, I think our events are pretty much open, but some of the committees that aren't the tier 1 that have the bylaws, like trying to be more intentional about principles, like, hey, we're looking for someone who's going to be more, I would say contrarian, but someone who maybe will poke some more holes here and some, you know, to try to, because they know there are people. Now, we are still going to miss some, yes, because they still have to be someone who's on a principal's radar to recommend, but it at least helps us when we're planning from a district level to have some from every building and trying to get a little bit of, I guess, diversity in those groups there. But I don't know that there is a one thing that works for everyone. It is hard, right? Like it's always frustrating when our, you know, with our surveys, if you're a person who just doesn't check email or read news from the district, you're probably also not going to be filling out the survey. That's how we distribute it, right? So.
Well, and even with like, oh, this whole other thing, but I'm just thinking, even with, you know, people that work, like staff that work with our homeless, you know, or care, you know, the kids who are unhoused community and stuff, like, you know, just being able to tap people sometimes, I guess, just for different perspectives. Like in my world, you know, it's always best to go directly to the customer to get feedback, but sometimes you have to have a proxy. Just, you know, but it's still better, like it's still a degree closer than you might be otherwise, so.
Yeah, like talking to the homeless coordinators or you know, the counselors, that, and just kind of, what do you see? Like, we know that there's this at-risk population and mom and dad are working 3 jobs and they can't come to this meeting, but what are you getting from them? Or is there some way when you're interacting with those families that you can ask them these 2 questions and get that feedback back? And I do encourage, and I know you guys are, because it sounds like particularly your senior program, is trying to connect with the community that doesn't have kids, because I think that's huge for schools, and it is frequently, like, it's easier for us to connect with our parents, like we can trap them, but connecting with the wider community that aren't our parents, and connecting with our staff. Which obviously you guys already have, you know, union and some systems in place that way as well, but providing that feedback. But yeah, the closest that we've come is some intentional inviting, and inviting in different ways. So not necessarily a parent or a senior, but somebody from the business community, somebody from the diverse communities. And I imagine if you just sat here, you could come up with a huge long list of, you know, different churches or businesses or homeowners associations, or, you know, on and on and on, the sports clubs. And
the last thing too, just as a tangent to that though, with when we think about community engagement and thinking about, I know at the summer summit we touched a little bit on just, you know, engaging your community assessors, and, you know, just building some relationship with some government people, or lobbying, you know, and like how, like, who's nailing that? Like, how do we go about that? Because I mean, everybody's just so busy with all of the things, and I think that's where I at least am still trying to get a feel for like what's appropriate and what's necessary. I mean, we got a lot of legislation. We were just talking, you know, a lot of big legislation where now feels like maybe more than in recent past a time for us to actually have a plan together as a board to rally for our school funding. But does anybody have models that look good for that? Like, here's who you should be talking to and how you might go about engaging them.
yeah, Yeah, I mean, we have several districts that I think really knock it out of the park as far as that, and that's definitely a board role, okay? So is the advocacy is a huge part of being a school board member, and a huge part of your board role, you are elected officials. There are other elected officials who impact your work, even if it's like the road and the streetlights and the sewers, to the assessors, the collectors, and I don't know if you've seen the news lately, but the county clerks we've had a snafu, and several of the county clerks didn't advertise some of the bond issues appropriately, and we've had 4 school districts' bonds not certified by the state auditor as they're required by law to do, and all of those schools are going to have to go back and rerun their bond issues, and the relationship with the clerk suddenly became very, very important and crucial to the operation of the school board. And there are a lot of similarities. We've got areas that the elected officials advocate together. I know MSBA belongs to we advocate for school boards, but we belong to a group that advocates for counties and the municipalities, because we do have a lot of similarities with those folks as well. And so that is definitely something that, and I know that your administration does, you have interaction, you have to have interaction with these people, like, how much money are you gonna send my way so I can make my budget,
Well, I knew
those
they
kinds
do,
of
but
conversations, but.
That's what I'm trying to figure out, like, how can we, or how should we, as a board unit, like, be stepping into that, or complementing, backing up, whatever the work, they're already doing.
We have districts that have advocacy committees, or the board creates some advocacy priorities, for the board. That is definitely board level stuff. And then they start breaking down, how can we, as a board, assist in this? Okay, and now it's not always like, okay, here's our priorities, now deal with it, superintendent. It is a partnership,
Yeah.
okay? Because you're elected. I mean, you are representatives of the community and constituents, and a lot of my board members don't realize that that invisible school board hat works in the community too, and sometimes quite for the benefit of your school district, is being able to be that voice when you go and meet the mayor, when you go and meet the assessor. They know you're an elected school board member. So
Yeah, okay.
If you want a couple of names to, Peggy Hassler at Melville, she was the president last year, I don't know if she's still the president after this year's reorg, and Tammy Heidland at Dunklin. Those are, that South St. Louis County,
Say that again, the last one.
Tammy Heidland at
Yeah.
Dunklin School District.
Dunklin.
Mhm. It's in Herculaneum. I never heard of Dunklin until I started working here. But I know they do a big thing in the spring, like when the legislators are on their spring break, they have them in for a breakfast, so they're actually really spending some quality time with their local reps, getting to know them personally versus just handshake and 5-minute conversation on
It kind of
advocacy
makes
day.
me think like last year, I think like Mr. Cook and Dr. Rumpus, myself, several couple of state senators and House rep members came in, and we took a visit to Howell High, so they could see school and see classes and how it worked. An additional thought that came out of that was, probably some type of a sitting down session afterwards and just talking about, what you saw, but also how you can support, how we advocate across the board.
So, using this example, would this be a situation where the board approves a plan, doesn't make the plan, so we might say, we would love to hear your ideas for how do we engage with these persons, and that they would just create an idea on who they would be speaking to, or maybe who we speak to, and then we approve that plan, versus us saying, one of us is going to talk to this person or that person. So using what we're learning today, how would we address this topic of, we want to learn more about advocacy? Is that the right step, is the idea? And on GLQ, government's level question, isn't what's the next step? Is it to ask them to be part of that?
Okay.
I mean, is that it?
Well, and this is, I think, in my opinion, a higher level function, okay? Because you are going to, as elected officials, walk hand in hand with administrative staff. And you are, this is one of the things that some boards are creating, like this is their own creation, okay? Your board is advocating for certain things. And then you as a board with input from the staff, because obviously you don't want to advocate for something that's harmful for the school district, with input from, let's look at your CSIP. You don't want to advocate for something that is, that torpedoes something that's already done. But advocacy is one of those higher level functions that the boards can get more involved in. It's not just a governance level question. You as a board can decide what your advocacy position is going to be. Now, individual board members might have differences, and they might have different recommendations, but you as a governance can decide this is what we're going to advocate for, just like you as a board can decide, you know, on your CSIP. The CSIP is presented to you, but is presented to you for approval. So once again, you're not just a rubber stamp, you know, but this is one where you are more in the fray, I would argue, than the curriculum and the communication, the daily communication and the running and the operation. This is definitely a board level function.
Would we have to vote amongst the board
Yes.
to say we're going to address
Yes.
this? Gotcha.
Yes, you need to get consensus. It's not going to be effective. Your advocacy is not going to be effective. An advocacy plan where only 2, 3, 4, but not the board as a whole needs to come to some agreement on what you need to advocate
But would you do that in a
for.
work session so that they have the ability to work through that? And then
Yeah,
they would
yeah,
take
and
it to
you know,
a vote?
some districts will do it in a board meeting, but I would argue it's a work session. I know Melville actually has a whole separate committee that they put together and create some advocacy. You know, they get input from all kinds of folks, staff and whatnot, and then try and, of course, there's tons of things we want to advocate for, but we always recommend that you pick like 3 and really focus on that, because that you really just don't have capacity for more than that. It also helps inform other things, like what are you the most worried about?
And where is the line if we get to, if there are particular ballot measures, that's where we as staff have to be very careful not to advocate. We're all information, we can inform, right? But the board, even with ballot issues as elected officials, could be more of an advocate role.
Yeah, so there is a state statute that says you can't use public funds to support or oppose a ballot issue. And so that ballot issue is key. So staff on staff time, we're paying, taxpayers are paying them. They can't advocate one way or another. However, staff on staff time can and should be advocating on some other things, right? Most superintendents spend a lot of time trying to educate legislators, communicate with legislators, trying to get good information. These days, there's a lot of misinformation out there. Getting good information to legislators, arguably that is an obligation of the superintendent to do, and that is the board's role as well. But you can't use public funds. So individual staff members can on their own time, and so that's where you get, like if you're running a bond or levy issue, sometimes staff will volunteer their time after hours. They can do that. It's got to be purely voluntary. And you guys have a voice, and you also have a sort of a megaphone. You can't use district funds to support, you know, I'm trying to think of something on the ballot.
Senate Bill 3.
No, there we go, Senate Bill 3. You know, you can't use district funds to do that, but you yourself can use your megaphone. And in fact, the law actually allows for public officials to use press releases. And so I've had boards that you can't, you know, put signs up, but the board as a whole can vote to issue a resolution and a press release on how they feel about a particular topic. And some boards have used that quite effectively.
So can I paraphrase what you just said to make sure I understand? So with Senate Bill 3 specifically gonna need to be on the ballot potentially either in the fall or the spring, when the ballot language is identified, then they could adopt a resolution to support or
Yes.
not support
Support or oppose it,
the
and you
ballot
can
language.
issue a press release
Okay.
on that. That is specifically in the
Okay.
law, that they are allowed to do that now. We can't put a bunch of flyers out, we can't put signs up in the building, we can't do that, but you guys can do that, and. Yes.
If the superintendent is able to speak to people and advocate in conversations, can they also advocate from their chair? Like, can they also post that we are for something or we are against something because of how it would impact our budget?
So the superintendent, it's interesting, you can't use public funds, but the law is clear that public officials do still have the ability to speak, okay? And so that's why, let's say that there's a bond issue out there. The superintendent and the staff frequently are going on to Kiwanis Club and Chamber and whatnot, using their voice to speak. They're not using district funds. There's a legal issue, about, okay, if he has a social media post, is it personal or is it as the superintendent who owns that post and stuff, and we can go through the analysis there. But certainly, the superintendent has the ability to put out as an individual, this is how this will impact our schools, and this is how I, as a superintendent, would encourage you to vote. It always makes, it's just an interesting line because he's the voice of the community. Some superintendents don't want to be that far out there, but knowing that people feel one way or another, and the superintendent and the staff are going to have to work with people, all people. And so how far out do we go on these particular issues? But some districts have been very effective at issuing the press release and just making a very clear case on this is what we think, this is why we think it, we understand why you might feel the other way, and but this is how it's going to impact schools. And we feel it's it's a responsibility on our part to make sure that you know how this might impact your school.
Very factually based though, where you would even say a no vote would equal this effect and a yes vote would have this effect.
Well, and that's a different thing. So then you can't support or oppose. You can't advocate for or against a ballot measure.
No, I'm saying
but
speak
then
factual.
If it's just purely fact, so that's the other. The other exception that districts capitalize on it a lot. So on one end, you can say, I have a resolution, we feel very strongly, we are advocating that you vote or not vote a certain way on a certain ballot issue. But then the other that you can use public funds on is purely factual information about a topic. Now that one's trickier because I've talked to I review these a lot. So I have a lot of people say, this is it, can we put this out? And it's purely factual, and then I read it and it's like, if you don't vote for this bond issue, all hell will break loose. And I'm like, that's not, and then I get into this argument, I'm like, that is advocating. That is not pure factual, and then they're like, no, all hell will break loose if this happens, and that's not, so it is, when you are passionate about something, it's easy for you to accidentally categorize an opinion as a fact. So you got to be careful about that. But there are ways. I mean, the intent of the law is not to completely squelch the voice of the board or squelch the voice of the district. Okay.
So this is a huge topic. I would imagine we're going to need a lot more of MSBA guidance in writing later on, but I know we have other things you might want to cover for this topic and others. But
sure. We wandered off, but this is good.
Oh no, we wandered off in a good direction.
We actually have a really good guidance on this, so if anybody wants to read that, I've got a good guidance I can send you.
Please do. I would like that.
All right.
Okay, moving on. So other ways to build healthy relationships with your community and parents is honoring that chain of command. And this is actually in your policy. I looked it up. It's policy 1480. How do you respond to parents and other community members when they approach you with a concern? Board member says this happened. I know you've only been on the board a little while, but people probably come up to you from time to time, right?
Yeah, they do. And there's another option here. We passed, I don't know if you read policy 412.
I did not.
Policy 412 states that you don't have to go through the teacher, the principal, the superintendent to get to the board. What you can do is go to the superintendent. If he cannot resolve your issue, then you have the right to go and spend 5 minutes before the board at the next available board meeting.
That's part of the...
That's part of the law, the
That's part of the
community
law,
engagement, yeah.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so that's somewhat new, right? When did that?
Last year.
Yeah, it's like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
The law passed, but the chain of command is still, that is the law, yes, you can do that. Is that the most effective way to get your issue resolved? Usually not.
Yeah, it also depends on the size of the issue.
Yeah.
Yes,
It
For
does,
sure.
yeah.
For sure.
So we've had one, I think, time when somebody invoked 412, right? So.
Yeah, we really think you should try to direct the person
Oh,
to the
sure.
person that can most easily solve that problem, who's most at that level of whatever the problem
And
is at.
typically, a lot of us, I know you probably do this too, you just send it off to Mark and say, handle it.
Yeah, or advise
Or,
them,
I'm
if,
sorry,
if they're
Mark, you didn't
complaining
know that,
about
did you?
a student issue, have you talked to the teacher? You know, you really need to talk to the teacher first. Oh, you did? Well, did you talk to the principal? You know, just kind of encouraging people to follow that chain of command also, because those are the people who can solve their problem the fastest versus you. And then he, you know, comes in his inbox, which is huge, you know, and he's got to move it on. It just takes longer time if it goes top down versus bottom up. So just advising them to start at that level where the problem is rooted. All right, so we've got 4 scenarios here, so I just want you to practice as we go through these and decide who would you direct them to. Would you direct them to the teacher, the principal, the superintendent, or the school board on these issues? So a parent is upset that her son has been on time at his bus stop every day this week, but the bus was 25 minutes late 3 out of 5 days. I'll go through them all and you can talk with them with your partner. A parent is upset that his daughter reported that the school fire alarms have gone off 5 times this week and it's only Wednesday. A parent is upset that her son was not allowed to use the restroom when he was in the middle of a science test. And a parent is upset that there is no policy requiring classroom doors to be locked during the school day. So just talk with your shoulder partner. Who would you direct? This parent comes up to you with this issue. Who would you advise they go to speak to?
The first one? I'd send it to the principal. That's what I would do. Second one? I would send that to the principal. Third one? I would go to
The teacher on that one, because some of the learners. Building is still gonna be principal. Classrooms versus teachers. A teacher. But it says no policy. So that would be more than
or even because if it's a district-wide thing.
That's true. It could be the safety plan.
But why, yeah. If it is a sacred plan, I think that is.
That's what I was, I think.
No, there isn't, because if he's going to say it wasn't. That's how we find things out.
It has gone back and forth a couple times in my life.
Has it?
You know,
Oh, yeah.
you wear the chain of command around buses. Like,
Yeah.
And so how much of that is responsibility of the
Okay, let's talk about these. Some of these are a little gray, and a lot of it depends too on your administration structure at the top a little bit as well. So let's start with you guys over here. We'll go this way this time. So we've got the bus that's late. So if you're the board member and the parent comes to you, who would you direct them to?
I'll reach out to transportation team.
Transportation team might have a superintendent in charge of transportation.
Could have superintendent tagged on the email or, you know, whatever that looks like.
That wasn't an
Yeah.
option.
So in this district, probably, so in our smaller districts, that might be the principal. Yeah.
We don't want the board to contact transportation. for
Right.
that.
Right.
Say to the parent, this is the reach out.
You make a good point. That was something I was going to say at the end. If you do it once, do the work, do the community, serve as the liaison or the middleman between the parent and whatever staff member, what's going to happen? It's going to snowball, and this word's going to get around. Oh, Amy, she'll help you. She'll contact them for you, and before you know it, you'll have more emails in your inbox than you want, right? Okay. What did you guys say about the next one, about the school alarms are going off all the time?
Principal.
Yeah, this is probably a building issue. The principal needs to be figuring out what's going on. Maybe working with somebody at central office who works with the safety team or the fire alarm team. But yeah, the principal needs to be on that.
I would,
Yeah.
or possibly even starting with your teacher, depending on the kid, because it does say his daughter reported, and sometimes kids can be like, oh, this happened. Blah, 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 and it's like, did this happen?
Yeah.
And then you maybe could go to the principal after that.
Yeah, or maybe, you know, maybe they should be asking another mom or dad friend, you know, is your kid saying this too? Maybe cross-checking the information before contacting. Yeah, but that's probably a building issue. All right, you guys, next in the corner there. Son wasn't allowed to use the restroom in the middle of the test. Who would you?
We said teacher.
Yeah, that's definitely a classroom issue, right? You need to talk to the teacher and get the full story there too. We might not have the whole story there as well. And then the last one, no policy requiring classroom doors to be locked during the school day.
Well, it's policy, so I think the board is appropriate there, but also I feel like anytime they wanted to go to the superintendent also with like a district policy
Yeah.
on something, that's not a bad idea either.
Yeah, so probably having them contact the superintendent, or that might be something like, oh, we maybe need to address that, and I'll bring it up in a board meeting, or I'll pass it on to the board president, and maybe we can put it on as an agenda item. So yeah, kind of that, but anything policy related is definitely board, so you kind of have some leeway there to talk to the superintendent about it, or your fellow board members.
Well, we actually have a process to a PIN form that could be the first step,
Yeah.
is direct them to the PIN form, which is on our
Oh.
website, which then gets routed through the superintendent policy committee, and we might be more complicated than some districts, but
What PIN, is that an acronym, or what's it?
policy issue
Oh.
lead, I think is what it
Oh,
stands
okay.
for. But it
Problem.
basically just asks the person proposing it to provide their rationale, and then that gives the policy committee more info when they sit down
Yeah,
and discuss it.
fantastic. So yeah, something like that would be perfect to direct them to that link on the website. All right, great. And then, again, to build that healthy relationship with the communities, making decisions based on the welfare of all students. If, parents see that you're always advocating for just a certain group or a certain type of group, they might not feel like you're really representing all students. So keeping in mind that you work for the kids, not the people who contributed to your campaign or voted for you, okay? They helped you get elected, sure, but you are there for all kids. And we like to say that the school board is not equal to politics. It doesn't matter if you're, Democrat, Republican, if you consider yourself progressive or conservative, whether fiscally or socially. It doesn't matter. Once you're elected, you got to we talked about that noise. Politics is a lot of noise, okay? And you really just need to always stay focused on the kids. And I think if the community sees that you always are asking governance level questions about the best interests of kids, about their academics and their well-being, you're going to build that community support. Aligning yourself with a particular group that's political is going to isolate the other half, right? So you want to try to build community and just keep everybody focused on what's best for kids. And again, yeah, academic achievement and well-being. And again, Susan touched on this already, so I'm not going to spend any time here. Really recognizing volume, really loud, couple really loud people versus the volume, like a lot of people are saying this. And that's sometimes hard to do. Sometimes you have to do a little investigating to kind of figure out, are these people speaking for a larger group, or is it really just these 5 people who are over and over and over in here complaining about the same things? And that's just really important to try to discern. Sometimes it's challenging, but again, trying to get a representative voice from everybody, like we talked about earlier, helps out with that. All right, so now we're moving on to the healthy relationship with the teachers union, and we're going to toss it back to the lawyer to talk about this.
Well, and we have 10 minutes. Is
Oh,
this? Yeah. So I'm wondering if this wouldn't be best saved for later. I mean, I'm trying to get
How long is the presentation? How long?
as long, I think for it to be appropriate, it needs to be deeper conversation,
Is
right?
15 minutes enough, or for what you're trying to accomplish tonight?
I can teach you a few things in 15 minutes.
Can we let's do 15 minutes, because I want us to all have a good start on this, because it's an important topic and it's a relationship that I really want to work on. And so if we can start on that in this conversation, that'd be great.
Okay, I'm game.
I'm going to set a timer,
That'd be good.
so we'll hold you to it.
Okay, well,
We wanna
I
honor
did
your
want
guys' time
to
too.
resurrect the Post-it notes, because I think this is gonna be informative of the conversation. Because it looks like listening, collaborating, learning their story, proactive, effective partnerships, strong communication, spending time together, trust, a lot of communication. So let me just share where I'm from, because this is kind of, when we talk about union relationships, and of course it depends on your background, people get nervous, right? They don't want to upset people. Some people have very strong opinions of unions. MSBA works very closely with the major, what I call teacher unions in the state. So MNEA, AFT, and the Missouri State Teachers Association. And in fact, we're cheering today because the NEA just filed a lawsuit challenging the state voucher program today, constitutionality. And we have we definitely have some advocacy positions that align, okay? We are on the education roundtable together with the teachers groups, and we work collaboratively with them a lot. Me personally, I have never been a member of the union, but my mother, who was a teacher for 32 years, was a very strong member of MNEA. She was a building rep, but she also crossed a picket line, both in the Kansas City School District and the Park Hill School Districts where she worked, so she did not believe in strikes. But she definitely believed in collaboration. So it is easy to try and pigeonhole unions into one thing or another, and I don't think that that's very helpful. What I think is helpful, in my personal opinion, with school board members is just understanding what a union is, okay, which is what it is, why they exist, all right, understanding the law, and that most challenging, which you guys have already picked up, which is developing that honest, transparent relationship with the union, okay? And so, when I talk, I took a stab, okay? School board stakeholders, and I probably missed some, but let's look at them. I mean, obviously our students are big in there, and I always put the parents in too, because the parents are advocates for the students, and so I think that's important. And I threw in employees, and you don't just have, I think a lot of people, when they think about employees, I think teachers, but you guys have a lot of employees, a lot of certificated and non-certificated, managerial and not managerial employees. Of course, our legislators, okay, I put them in the circle, the business community, that's huge. Residents and property owners, which aren't the same thing. People own property here that maybe don't live here. And your taxpayers, voters, okay? Who's missing in this group? Did I miss any?
I mean, our plan always talks about media, but I don't know that I'd call them a stakeholder. It's just a thing that has influence that we cater to sometimes.
I'm big in, when we talk, then it goes down to the question of what is a stakeholder. But yeah, I mean, these are very important, but they're not center, right? Center's got to be students. And so sometimes when the interests of the business community is one way, but the interest of the students is another, we have to make choices. You guys have a lot of stakeholders is really what I'm telling you. You got a lot. You got everybody. Okay? All right, now, just quickly, and needless to say, I liked your mission statement, so I put it up there, because empowering students to be lifelong learners. Students is right smack in the middle. And I loved your logo, too, because it's home, school, community. I mean, you almost did my circle for me. Of course, I saw that after I did my circle. So, so real quick, the Missouri School Boards Association. Who's in the center of my circle? School boards, yes, school boards. Helping school boards ensure students succeed. That's our mission. So school boards. Who else is in my circle? Administrators, yes, because I mean, I can tell you 90% of the phone calls I take are from the administrators, not board members, all right? Even though I work for the Missouri School Boards Association. Who else? Teachers, yes.
Yes, all staff.
All staff members, yes, because school, I mean, at my work, there's a reason we're on the education roundtable with all these other groups, right? The principals, the administrators, and the PTA. PTA's in there too. Darn, I didn't put PTA in there. The circle, that's one.
Legislators again.
But who's in the center of my circle?
Still the students.
Yeah.
Because without the students, none of us are here.
Well, that's true.
Okay.
That's true. Who's the member of my association?
The school district.
The board.
Yeah.
The board. And the board supports the students.
Okay.
But yes, students are in my circle too. Okay? But as an attorney in particular, my client is the school board. Okay? And so, union, who's in their circle?
Teachers.
Teachers for sure, yes.
Students.
And I don't know, do you guys just have union I mean, do you have I know you have a CBA for your teachers. Do you have other CBAs?
We do.
Okay, what other groups?
Teamsters for bus drivers and monitors, and then support professionals, which are nurses, paras, secretarial staff,
IT.
Keep talking.
IT.
Maintenance grounds.
maintenance grounds, custodians, yeah,
nurses,
computer
interpreters,
techs,
students.
and then social workers.
Education support counselors.
Yeah.
So lots of different.
Lots of stakeholders.
But it's not the same union, right?
No.
Yeah, well, you have
Teamsters is different than NEA, I
Yes,
know.
And then everybody else is in.
Everybody else is NEA, okay. And so, who else is in the circle?
There are students,
Students.
parents.
Students, yes.
Parents, community.
Board.
And really what I'm trying to say is that who's in your circle, okay, depends on the focus of your group, okay? And my stakeholders at MSBA aren't always the same stakeholders as the Missouri Association of School Administrators, okay? Which isn't the same thing as the MNEA, okay? In fact, part of the Education Roundtable, one of the rules is any member can veto a topic because there are certain topics that that group won't get along with. Even though they all put students in the middle, okay? The way that we get to it is different, all right? When I get calls from superintendents, 99% of the time I know that they are calling me as a conduit for the school board, so no problem, okay? But if they call and ask me a question about their employment contract, I cannot answer that question, okay? Then I have a conflict between the administrators and my board, and my board is in the center of my circle, okay? They are my client, okay? So I have to say, you're gonna have to find another person to talk to about this. I can't talk to you about this. You wanna talk about your board policy or the new law or whatever, I'm on board, okay? But I can't do that. I think, and this is just me, the biggest issue is understanding the various groups that you work with is that your circles are not all the same, okay? It doesn't mean that they don't love your community or they don't love students or they don't love, no. But the constituents of the union and the political forces of the union are different than the political forces that the school board has to deal with. They don't exactly align, okay? I have lots of districts where the community is not necessarily supportive of unionization. Maybe it's not common. I have some districts where because of the surrounding area and maybe the different businesses that are there, the community expects unionization, okay? That is, I think, the most difficult thing for school boards and unions to understand is the perspective that they are coming from, okay? It's not always the same. We hope there's some alignment. We reach out and we collaborate when there is alignment, but it is extremely important for board members and administrators and union members to understand that our focus is not always going to be in alignment, and that is where the rub happens, okay? There are a lot of pressures on unions that school boards don't have to deal with. And so I had actually just quickly picked out, and I think I went back, a relatively recent news article about NEA membership dropping in 2024, okay? And everybody wonders why that is. Why is union membership dropping? And is that a good thing? Is that happening in your area or is it not? In Missouri, we're from a very kind of goofy background as far as unionization goes. Because about the time that in the nation union membership has dropped or is dropping, or there were lots of states that were passing laws limiting public sector unions, and when I talk about public sector unions, I'm talking about unions that represent local municipalities or the state. These are unions that aren't represented by the National Labor Relations Act. Okay, so what most Ford plants and McDonnell Douglas and all of those are governed by the National Labor Relations Act, National Labor Relations Board. Ever since the 1930s, unionization has been legal for all those entities. Unions didn't become legal for school districts in the state of Missouri until this court case in 2007, okay? And so at a time when, so Missouri just isn't used to, you guys have a lot of union presence here in this district. That is becoming much more common in the St. Louis area. There's lots of group in the St. Louis area. There's probably only 60 districts in the state that have a union presence in them, like an actual collective bargaining agreement level of union. All of my districts in the state have collaboration with their teachers and with their staff in some way, shape, or form, but it does not always, and very rarely, quite honestly, takes a true union shape, shall we say, okay? So I just think it's kind of important. So this is what the Missouri Constitution says, that employees shall have the right to organize and bargain collectively through representatives of their own choosing. You would have thought in 1945 that was pretty clear, but we had a court case that said no, and that was overturned in 2007, okay? So it's really the independence case that, and this, we haven't had any law since then. I mean, the one law that they passed has been declared unconstitutional. So we're back to this court case, which says that public sector employees, which are all of your employees, have a constitutional right to organize into a union and to collectively bargain with the district. The district must meet with the chosen union and listen, but are not required to enter in a collectively bargain agreement. And if a district doesn't enter into a CBA, it's binding and enforceable in court. Okay? So that's pretty much the law of Missouri right there. Okay? So the question that I have for you, because that court case doesn't require you to enter into collective bargaining agreements, okay? And your district in particular, I'm sorry, I'm right in front of you. Your district in particular has several collective bargaining agreements, okay? So if a district's not required by law to enter into a collective bargaining agreement, how do employees and their unions convince the school district to enter into them? Okay? I had, when the law first passed, a board member call, because I write policy all the time. They said, why don't you just write us the ideal agreement and we'll just use that, you know, now that collective bargaining is legal. And I said, from a lawyer's standpoint, and I know we ruin most things, and I'm willing to admit that, but from a lawyer's perspective, the best CBA is a blank piece of paper, okay? That doesn't mean that I don't like your staff, and I don't think that they deserve great benefits. But as far as flexibility for the district to deal with things like declining revenues, boards can give your staff great benefits, and many districts do, without a collective bargaining agreement, okay? And districts can provide a great working environment without a collective bargaining agreement. And you can write great policies without a collective bargaining agreement. And so why would you enter into a collective bargaining agreement if you didn't have to do it? I'm not going to tell you the answer. And I don't know the answer. Okay?
Well, I think we're talking about relationships with the teachers union. One of the ways would have opportunities for listening and collaboration. And so a collective bargaining agreement would allow that conversation to take place in ways that it may not have taken place otherwise.
Yes. But we have a lot of districts that have those teams that get together. Salary and benefits, some of them call it meet and confer, but it doesn't end up with a collective bargaining
I think
agreement.
sometimes CBAs come about because sometimes things put into writing feel very black and white, so it helps guide principles on both sides. So I think sometimes that's how they came to fruition. You know, it feels good to both sides to have an agreement that's there and both sides support.
Okay, but would policy be enough? That's kind of black
Could be,
and white.
oh, sure.
Well,
I'm
you
just
could also-
answering your question.
Oh, I know, you're doing it. I'm just pushing back, These are conversations that I have had.
I think sometimes people are afraid, some, board members come and go, administrators come and go, teacher leaders come and go, and so if there is some agreed upon decision that this team feels really strongly about, I think there's some comfort in knowing it's written down so that if Mr. Delaney's our superintendent and we had agreed to this and he no longer is the superintendent tomorrow, that we have this assurance that this benefit is going to continue. And that, I think, gives people some assurances that the things that they have as far as benefits and salary will continue regardless of if Stephen's elected the president or Mark is still the superintendent, whatever the case may be. I think it gives them that assurance.
I think too, just like how we can leverage you guys, does a school board need the MSBA? No, not necessarily, but it's all of the extra value that's provided in the knowledge and the expertise and the pooling of that and the disseminating of information and the sharing of all of that stuff, I think is also really helps maximize perspective and make us probably more effective in the long run.
I think that, and to that point, nobody is arguing that a teachers union, employees union shouldn't exist, that these groups shouldn't exist. And in fact, in every single one of the districts that I work with, there is a group of teachers and a group of employees that exists for that very reason, to disseminate knowledge, to professional development, to communicate with the board, to communicate, those kinds of things exist, okay? It's just that what I have found, and I know this is not enough time for us to dig appropriately into this, is when it comes to positive board relations and teacher relations, it's important for us to remember that sometimes there's going to be situations where the employees want something you can't give them, okay? And what I fear is that, particularly we've got some financial things coming down the pike. We're really uncertain about what's happening at the federal level with funding, and the fiscal cliff is coming, where our pandemic money is cut off, and there's rumors and discussion about whether or not the governor might withhold some funds later on this year, and of course speculation. And I have no more knowledge than any other human being on that, so I don't mean to start rumors. But we're going to have a time, not too distant future, where we don't have deep reserves and we don't have the ability to pay teachers and staff as much as we want them to, or maybe give them the benefits that they want. There's always that situation, okay? And if it's difficult to have a relationship when in the good times, how much more difficult will it be in situations where you simply can't give them what you feel that they deserve, okay? And so I go back to, it's not a mystery, your sticky notes here, okay? And some of the discussion, which is that clear communication is important. I've got some scenarios, but we don't have time for this. Clear communication is important. Transparency is important. Understanding that sometimes the board's constituency is, you can't agree to something that they want because you have to advocate for stakeholders that maybe they aren't advocating for, okay? That having clear communication, consistent communication, the boards that I think do it effectively, they come up with, before there's a hot issue, come up with a communication plan with the union, okay? Because elsewise, there's lots of side conversations, people calling individual board members, a frequent, when people get stressed, so, well, you gave us the bad word, or you gave us the bad news. Whoever had to deliver the bad news that maybe we're not gonna get the raise that we wanted, you know, that's gotta be the bad person, you know. It's easy for intelligent adults to divide, okay? And so creating a communication system where union members are, this is how you communicate with the board, and then the rest of the board sticks with it, is very important, so that A, the entire board gets the same message, but B, you are not pulled apart, okay, by your very many staff members with their very many opinions. And that's just surface level for what I think is a much deeper conversation. Listening is crucial, but not just listening to your staff, but listening to your administrators. Okay, there's always two sides of the story. And I don't know if there's much more I can shove into my more than 10 minutes that has occurred, but I have some scenarios that I think would have been more useful for us to go through, but we don't have time for that.
We can pick it up next time.
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
I just want to say thank you. You identified, I think it was you, that the purpose of the whole school district is to create, lifelong learners. And I think part of that can be embodied by all of us to be curious and trying to find ways that we all can learn too. Whether it's learning how to be a board or board president or interim superintendent or administration. So I think just overall the language of curiosity, that approach, I think could really do us well. And I thank the two of you for both Susan Goldhamer and Lisa Nieder. I want to say thank you for being here. All of you who are also here, awesome. We also have Jane Hepler, Michelle Jones, and Scott Gowan over here who are doing
The great
a lot of
support
work.
team.
And we have one community member who is here. Hello. This is Kim from FHEA who tirelessly works on behalf of students. I just want to say thank you for being the community member who is here.
Yes,
So
that's
welcome.
right.
So we don't have to do any motions stuff. Just want to say, maybe by a round of applause, thank you all for being here. Thank you all very much. All right.
Thank you.